Hello, this is the recorded discussion section of my grade 8 LCM exam submission. I will first of all begin the discussion section with Allegro, the first movement from Sonata in F minor. Now, explain your approach to learning this piece. Which section was the trickiest for you to learn? How did you overcome the difficulty? Describe some of the practice techniques you used. First of all, as I do with many other pieces, I first started playing the piece with separate hands, and after achieving a little bit of fluency, I started to play with both hands, but bar by bar, of course, in order to focus a little bit more on accuracy. And then after achieving both of those things, I started to gradually increase the tempo to the one indicated on the piece. The trickiest section for me was between bars 125 and bar 131. This section was tricky because the right hand plays in a wide register while the left hand moves between many arpeggios, and following both hands at such a high tempo was definitely a challenge. However, I was able to overcome this by looking for a connection between notes that are close to each other but not in the same arpeggio in the left hand. For example, in bar 125, our first arpeggio starts with A flat and our second one starts with G. Now, after seeing this, I said to myself, I only need to descend one note to play the next one. And so on and so forth, I was able to decode that whole section. Now, what can you tell me about the composer and the historical and stylistic context of the piece, and how did it affect your interpretation? Now, this piece was written by Ludwig van Beethoven. Beethoven is a very, very, very well-known composer of the classical period. Well, we say classical period, of course, but his works also contain a transition towards the Romantical era. His works contain symphonies, concertos, sonatas, chamber music such as violin and string quartets, and a single opera named Fidelio. By the way, speaking of sonatas, these Opus 2 sonatas, that, for example, the one I just played, were dedicated to Joseph Haydn, who he had met in his hometown of Bonn, and who tutored them in his early years in Vienna. Sketches for the Opus 2 sonatas were made in 1793, but they weren't finished until 2 years later. At 1801, Beethoven's hearing started to deteriorate, and by 1810, he started to become less and less socially involved. He passed away at 1827, but his works are still remain the mainstays of classical era repertoire today. Now, this is a classical era piece, and that it can be seen clearly as it has a very distinct separation between the melody line and the accompaniment line. And I used cantabile in order to further emphasize that. Other than that, another thing I had to pay attention to was every single detail in the piece, because the classical era is very predeterministic and rational. So I had to play everything as noted and not deviate from it too much. This included both the rhythmic structure and the ornaments in the piece, even though it made it quite harder to play. Explain any performance issues you came across while interpreting music of this period. Well, as I just said, the classical era is very mathematical, and so this piece has a very rigid rhythmic structure that I shouldn't and mustn't deviate from. So following that rhythmic structure at such a high tempo, allegro, it was very hard, of course. I couldn't use rubato, for example, where applicable, or any similar things, in order to give me a little bit of a bathing room. Describe the form and the main key of this piece. Now, this is a classical sonata, so it is internally formed. The exposition section starts at bar 1 and ends at bar 48. The development section starts at bar 49 and ends at bar 100. And the recapitulation section starts at bar 101 and goes until the end of the piece. Now, the main key of this piece is, as the name suggests, F minor. And we start the exposition section in F minor, but we quickly modulate to our relative major, which is A flat major at bar 20. And we stay at A flat major until the end of the exposition section, and also for most of the development section. But at the end of the development section, we quickly modulate back to our tonic, because we are about to enter the recapitulation section and it has to be in the tonic. So we end the development section and enter the recapitulation section in tonic, which is F minor, and we stay at F minor until the end of the piece. What is the largest interval you found in the right hand? The largest interval I found in the right hand was at bar 41, where we have a compound major second. Our bottom note is D flat and our top note is E flat. However, the largest melodic interval I found, however, was a compound minor sixth at bar 121. The bottom note is F and the top note is D flat. Excuse me. Okay, now the nocturne in F minor. So, which of the pieces you played today was your favorite and why? How do you think your performance went today? Okay, so this piece is obviously my favorite because it has a lyrical structure and the ornaments really add a depth of sophistication to the piece. Other than that, the rhythmical changes and the rubato really dismiss any chance of monotony the piece would normally have. Other than that, I believe that the left hand's trance-like quality gives the piece a calming feeling. And I think my performance today was actually pretty good. I paid attention to the foundations and the rules of the Romantical era, and yes, I'm pretty satisfied with it. Explain your approach to learning this piece. Which section was the trickiest for you to learn? How did you overcome this difficulty? Describe some of the practice techniques you used. Now, first of all, after seeing this piece, I said to myself, okay, this is a little too complicated, let's dial it back. So I omitted any ornaments in the piece to begin with, but I specifically kept the septuplets and triplets, for example, like the ones you would see at bar 43 and 44. This is because even though they are very sophisticated and hard to play, they are a vital piece of the piece. So I had to keep them there and specifically pay attention to them. Other than that, I achieved fluency and accuracy and re-added the ornaments and started to slowly increase the tempo to the one indicated on the piece. What can you tell me about the composer and the historical and stylistic context of the piece, and how did it affect my interpretation? Okay, so this piece was written by Frédéric Chopin. Frédéric Chopin is again a very well-known composer of the Romantical era. His works contain, for example, mazurkas, polonaises, waltzes, and nocturnes, but he is mostly known for his solo piano pieces. By the way, speaking of nocturnes, even though Frédéric Chopin's nocturnes are very, very well known, he didn't actually invent the form. The nocturne form, music inspired by or evocative of the night, was actually invented by John Field, an Irish composer, but Frédéric Chopin took it away from Field's more relaxed form and made it a lot more sophisticated. So we can say that he essentially recreated nocturnes. Other than that, a child prodigy, Frédéric Chopin finished his musical education and started composing before he was 20. And he moved to 20s at 21, and he only gave 34 performances for the rest of his life. He might have passed away, but his innovations in style, harmony, musical form, and his association with music and nationalism had a very deep influence in the Romantical era. Now, so this is a Romantical era piece, and we can see it clearly, okay, because of the rubato. So, as many of the Romantical era pieces and Chopin's pieces widely utilize the rubato, I also had to utilize the rubato here. but I had to not exaggerate it, because if I exaggerated it, the piece became more distant. And then, yes. Other than that, I had to apply cantabile, as I do with many other pieces, to further accentuate the already clear separation between the melodic and harmonic lines. Yes. Yes, another thing that I would like to say is this piece is compatible, actually very compatible with the rest of the Romantic era period, because Romantic era composers are known for their tendency to write their music pieces with popularity in mind. We can also see that in this piece, the intense repetitions of the main theme suggest that this piece was made to be remembered very easily by both casual and educated listeners alike. Yes, so explain any performance issues you came across while interpreting the music of this period. Now, the most difficult thing about music of this period is, in my opinion, the rubato. Rubato is difficult to apply because applying rubato while trying to keep a linear and continuous motion is very hard, of course. But I was able to deal with it by tuning down the rubato a little bit. This made it so that I was able to flex the momentum of the piece while still keeping it intact. Describe the form and the main key of this piece. Now, this piece is also in terming form. It has a section, a B section, and an A variation section. The A section starts at bar 1 and ends at bar 48 at the più mosso. And the B section starts at bar 48 and ends at bar 72. And the A variation section starts at bar 73 and goes to the end of the piece, where we have a coda and cadenza starting from bar 89. Now, our main key is, of course, F minor, and we start the A section in F minor, and we stay at F minor for the A section. However, with the beginning with the B section, we start to travel through many chords, such as C minor, G diminished, E diminished 7th, and D flat 7th. And we end the whole section with a C minor chord at bar 72. And we quickly go back to our tonic, of course, at bar 73. So we are back at F minor. But after this, we enter the coda and cadenza, and later we end the piece with F major. Now, we just ended a minor tonality piece with a major chord. This musical term has a name, a tierce de Picardie, or namely a Picardy third. What is the largest interval you found in the right hand part? The largest interval I found in the right hand part was at bar 98, where we have a compound major second. This harmonic interval has bottom note is the B flat, and its top note is C. No. And lastly, the man I love. Explain your approach to learning this piece. Which section was the trickiest for you to learn? How did you overcome this difficulty? Describe some of the practice techniques you used. Now, this piece had 3 difficult things in my opinion. The amount of chords and moving between them, the timing of the triplets, and the cantabile. Now, I will tackle these things one by one. First of all, after seeing the piece, I was, to be honest, a little intimidated, because this piece contains a lot of chords that need to be played simultaneously and need to be moved through very fast. So I first started to play the chords one by one so that I could get a feeling for it. And I noticed that the tone gradually became deeper as I played the chords. So I was able to use this to my advantage by predicting the next chord that I could possibly play. So it made playing the piece drastically easy. However, of course, there were still some sections where this wasn't applicable. And secondly, the triplets. Now, the triplets were hard because suddenly switching from what keys I'm going to be pressing and to the timings of the triplets was very hard for me. Thankfully, this was easily solved by counting crochets instead of quavers. This made timing the triplets way easier while keeping the chords accurate and intact. And lastly, the cantabile. The cantabile was very difficult to apply in this piece because most of the chords that are played in this piece are simultaneous, and the separation between the melodic line and the accompaniment line, is not clear like it is with allegro or nocturne. It is very shrouded, so I had a very hard time applying cantabile in this piece. So what can you tell me about the composer and the historical and stylistic context of the piece, and how did it affect my interpretation? No, very good question. This piece was composed by George Gershwin. George Gershwin is a well-known American painter and pianist who is mostly known for his musical pieces, such as, for example, Rhapsody in Blue, An American in Paris, and Rhythm Changes. So, I Got Rhythm. I Got Rhythm is especially important because it is the foundation of a chord progression in jazz music called Rhythm Changes, which are based on this piece. Yes. George Gershwin actually started playing music as a song plugger, but soon after noticing that he was actually really talented, he started to compose Broadway musical pieces. Yes, and became the well-known person he is today. Now, this piece is clearly a 20th century piece, and it can be seen because of all the 7 parallel 8 movements and 7 chords that this piece has. Yes. Yes. These 7 chords and parallel 8 movements make the separation between the classical era, the melodic line and the accompaniment line very shrouded. So I had to pay attention to the cantabiles, and I had to pay attention to both where I should apply it and to which notes I should apply it to. Other than that, these dissonant sounds and again the 7th chords really are against the classical harmony in, for example, the classical era. Yes. Explain any performance issues you came across while interpreting the music of this period. Okay. So since this is a classical era piece, as I just said, it contains many 7th chords, parallel 8 movements again. Well, these were a problem because these pieces break the harmony that we are mostly used to. But there is still a continuous motion throughout the piece. So quantizing the rhythmic structure by playing vertical chordal units while simultaneously keeping horizontal motion was very challenging for me. Yes. Describe the form and the main key of this piece. Now, and this piece is also internally formed. We have an A section, a B section, and an A variation section. Our A section starts at bar 1 and ends at bar 16. The B section starts at bar 17 and ends at bar 24. And the A variation section starts at bar 25 and goes until the end of this piece. Now, the main key of this piece is E flat. However, E flat major. Right? Yes, and this is our main key for the A section. But for the B section, our main key is this time C minor. And when we go back to our A variation section, our main key becomes E flat. Now, the main theme of this piece is already quite clearly separable. But this separation can be made even cleaner by dissecting this piece into phrases, subphrases, and fragments, and such things. For example, the first section consists of two 8-bar phrases, which with two 8-bar subphrases, which can each be separated into 4 2-bar motifs. This same structure can also be applied to the B section and the A variation section, except the A variation section ends in a coda, so we can't completely apply to that and consider the whole coda as a motif. And what is the largest interval you found in the right hand part? The largest interval I found in the right hand part, the largest harmonic interval I found in the right hand part, was the octaves that could be found in almost everywhere in the piece. For example, the one at the first bar. When the largest melodic interval I found in this piece was at bar 17, where we have a compound perfect fourth. Our bottom note is at the third beat, the B flat, and our top note is at the fourth beat, an E flat.